before we get started, I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Anthony. I work on the education team here at HashiCorp. So we collectively create all of the technical guides that you guys follow along to get up to speed with all of our products and learn how to do all the cool things with them. And as Justin was mentioning, there's 2 TAs here today. Joe's over there. I also don't see Gerald yet, but he will be showing up. If you have questions at any point, feel free to raise your hand. If I can't see you because of the bright lights, Justin or Joe will walk over and find you and then somehow let me know that there's questions, and we'll do our best to answer them as they come up. But if you want to wait till the very end, please do that as well if you like. So we're going to jump right into it here. One thing I'm going to do before I actually start the presentation is there is a gist I've made, which will follow along with the tutorials that I'll also link in just a second. But the gist here has the very salient links, I guess we'll say, or like the bullet points that you need to know. But we will follow along with the tutorials that I'll go over in just a little bit. But that short link for now is labnotes.hathatgames.com. You can type it in now. You can wait. I'll show it again just as a heads up if you want to do that. And it'll take you to our gist here with all the instructions that I'll go over. But getting back to our presentation here, let me grab my prop here. So Hat Games returns to talk to you again about HCP Waypoint. If anybody was here from HashiConf last year, you might remember us. We were also there telling you all about our new games that we were creating. Hat Games, for some background, for those of you that weren't there, is a small indie dev game company focused on making games, not hats. We've become wildly popular since presenting last year at HashiConf. As a result, we're trying to grow our developer team, make it as easy as possible for them to onboard and get creating games quickly. We still use Waypoint, and we're leveraging the new templates and add-ons features that were announced yesterday in HCP Waypoint to make it even easier for our developers to contribute by abstracting away all infrastructure-related things. So no more ECS or Waypoint runners or anything else for developers to worry about. That's all been abstracted away. All they have to do now is log into HCP Waypoint, click a couple buttons, and they're ready to go with whatever it is we want them to create. So I'll go over a little bit later the actual intricacies of what we're going to be creating with templates and add-ons. But the gist of it is we want to make it easy for developers to say, I need an application, I need some infrastructure for it, I don't want to deal with Terraform because it's not my bag, and they shouldn't be worrying about it anyway because they're here to develop, not to create infrastructure like we are. So I'll go over that a little bit later. The agenda we're going to go over today, we're going to start with a little overview of HCP Waypoint and the new features I mentioned, templates and add-ons. I will go over the scenario in a little bit more detail. We will do the lab together. This is a hands-on lab, so if you want to have hands-on keyboards, please do so. If you don't and you just want to hear me talk, that's also cool. Thanks for showing up. And then we'll end up and finish with our conclusion, any questions you have. But like I said before, if you have questions during it, this is supposed to be interactive, so please raise your hand. TAs will get questions up to me if we have any during the presentation. So what is HCP Waypoint? For those uninitiated, it's a hosted HashiCorp Waypoint service. It lets platform teams define templates for application infrastructure, and it lets developers self-serve and focus on code. That's really the point I want to drive home here with HCP Waypoint is the developers no longer have to interface directly with the platform engineering team to say, I need this specific infrastructure. When you use HCP Waypoint correctly, all of that is templatized either in a template or an add-on configuration. And then the developer just logs in HCP Waypoint, self-serves, and says, I need this application, I need this add-on, and they're just ready to go. And then finally, templates and add-ons as another quick overview. Templates both of them are how we can create templatized definitions for infrastructure for our developers. The main difference here is templates are meant for infrastructure that we feel every application will need or require, whereas add-ons are infrastructure that we think they might need, but not every application needs it. So things like a database might not be needed by every application, or a load balancer, or any other infrastructure you can think of. And the important thing I want to point out here is this is entirely up to the platform engineering or the team that's actually defining these definitions. They can decide what is required, what is additional and not required. And if they want to mix and match and say, all of our applications need everything, everything goes in a template. If they say basically nothing is required, everything becomes an add-on. Or somewhere in between, it's entirely up to them. So, more about Hat Games. What are we doing today? So the scenario we're going to cover today is a new developer joins our team, which is effectively all of you. So thank you for joining us. If you have any payroll questions, come find me after. We'll deal with that. So all the new developers are joining our team. We want to get them up and running with a code repository with a CI workflow that will generate a preview environment for their application. And finally, we want to make this as simple a self-service process as possible. And we're going to do that with HCP Waypoint. So this is our flow for the platform engineer. You can see from the top left, our platform engineer interacts with 3 different platforms here: GitHub, Terraform Cloud, and HCP Waypoint. So on the left side, we'll see 3 different GitHub repo modules there, or the first 2 rather are modules. So these are the repositories for the module code that will, 1, create our static app module. So the static app module here, as I was mentioning, will create the developer a GitHub repository with GitHub pages enabled and a GitHub Actions workflow to then package up their application and deploy it to GitHub pages. And then the subdomain module we will follow a little bit later, which will create a subdomain on our hatgames.com top-level domain. And that's just a way for them to say, I'm ready to show this application to the world. I don't want to give them my github.io link. It looks a little bit not professional. So we're going to generate them a subdomain there. And then the final repo there is app template. So this is our example application code that has a static app inside of there, and developers can go in there, change it to whatever they want. It also includes the GitHub Actions workflow file. So it's baked into the app template repository. So as it gets copied during the process of the static app module execution, that's where it copies the code from. The second part here is Terraform Cloud. These are where we're defining, as the platform engineer, we're publishing the module to TFC, and then Terraform Cloud is actually pulling in the module code when we publish it. And then finally on the right side is HCP Waypoint. So as the platform engineer, we also go in there and we create a definition for our template and our subdomain add-on. So we use the UI to say, here's all the information we need to put for our static app template, likewise for our add-on template or add-on definition. And HCP Waypoint will do a couple things when it interacts with Terraform Cloud. 1, it will create a workspace ad hoc as it's being requested. And 2, it will run the appropriate no-code module inside of Terraform Cloud inside of that workspace and then create the resources for us. It will report back to HCP Waypoint, display it to the developer, everybody's happy. Cool, so that's the platform engineer flow. The developer flow is a little bit different in that they only interact with HCP Waypoint and obviously GitHub to commit any of their code changes that they want. This is, again, by design. So developers are not meant to interact with Terraform Cloud. We don't want them dealing with infrastructure, 1, because things could happen, and 2, they probably don't want to because they're a developer, not a platform engineer, and that's totally fine. So what they will do is interact with HCP Waypoint using the UI. So they will go there and select, create a project from a template, input whatever fields of information we need from them, and then that will kick off the workflow. So there's no arrow from the developer to TFC, again, because they're not interacting with it, but HCP Waypoint is. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, it will interact with TFC, create a workspace, execute the code. For our static app workspace, you can see that it does interact with GitHub, and that's what's copying our example app repository code from the template repository into the new one that will be created for the developer. Similar workflow for the subdomain add-on there. It will interact Terraform Cloud, create the workspace, execute the module code, but it will also create a Route 53 configuration. So I've preset this up a little bit just as like a little magic because I don't want to go through this in front of all of you because it's kind of boring. Suffice to say, I've created a hosted zone in Route 53, and I've updated my domain settings to use those name servers so that Route 53 can take over creating subdomains for us. So all this to say, as part of the subdomain execution, it will create a new record in there that says point the name of the app.hatgames.com to the github.io site, so the one that's actually hosting their application. A couple caveats I want to point out here. The keen-eyed among you will probably realize that this is not the best way of doing it. This is a limitation of GitHub Pages, let's say. If you've ever worked with GitHub Pages, you might know that it doesn't allow CNAME record configuration at the repository level. It allows it at the organization or user level. So little hand-wavy magic here. That's the reason why we're doing it this way. Because Terraform no-code modules are just Terraform modules, you can do whatever configuration you want, assuming that your domain lives inside of AWS. Again, hand-wavy, please forgive me today. Hopefully it works anyway. We're going to move on to lab. Are there any questions right now that I can field before we dive into the lab? Not seeing any, and that's totally cool. So the first link here, developer.hashicorp.com, this is the link directly to our HCP Waypoint tutorials. And the second one, labnotes.hathatgames.com, if you all want to open that now, that contains the link to the tutorials we will follow, as well as a whole bunch of other ones. So I'll give you a chance to copy that down while I check my notes real quick. Oh, that's not great. So these are the lab notes you will get to when you follow labnotes.hathatgames.com. The only real prerequisite here is that you have your AWS credentials ready, because we are going to be loading those into Terraform Cloud. But I will grab my hat again. But this time I'm putting on my platform engineer hat. And you can tell I'm the platform engineer because I'm the one who configures the HashiCorp tools. And again, while I'm on this, imagine that I'm a platform engineer at Hat Games. I'm doing all the platform engineering stuff today. So one more level setting thing I want to point out before we start is HCP Waypoint uses the no-code provisioning feature inside of Terraform Cloud. If you've researched that or you've learned about it, you'll know that TFC requires a plus level account, plus tier account, in order to access that no-code feature. So what that means for us today is if you have a plus tier HCP account, great, or pardon me, TFC account, follow along with everything I'm doing as a platform engineer and a developer. If you don't, that's totally fine. You're just going to be developers today. So when I have my platform engineering hat on, you don't have to necessarily worry about following along. When I switch to my developer hat, though, you can follow along with me. And again, I will let you know when, as a developer, you need to follow along versus just listen to me. The reason why we're doing this has to do with module variables. So we initially thought that we wanted to get everybody in our TFC workspace working that way. The downside to that is the way the module works is it uses global variables. And because they're global across all the workspaces, if everybody were to log in and try to create their modules for their specific repositories and Waypoint projects, wouldn't work out really well. So we kind of redesigned it to say, you're going to be developers today, and you're going to use our TFC space, but your own HCP account. And this will all become a lot clearer when we continue with the lab now. The first thing I want to do is create forks of our module repositories here. So I'm going to open up our developer page here. So developer.hashicorp.com is the place, if you've ever used any of our guides, where all of them live. We're going to select Waypoint, and we're going to tutorials. And these are all the tutorials we're going to follow today. So this is the getting started for HCP Waypoint, the new version. We are going to start by going to create a Waypoint template. I'm going to do this a little bit out of order, not exactly following the tutorial, just because it makes a little bit more sense for the lab today. But the first thing we're going to do is fork our modules. So feel free to follow along with the tutorial as I'm talking here. I'm going to go back to the lab notes just because it's a little bit easier for me. But again, the first thing we're going to do is fork our static app repository. The reason we're forking this has to do with the way Terraform Cloud works for modules. So Terraform Cloud connects to your GitHub account or your GitLab account, your VCS in general, and it queries all of the repositories you have access to, pardon me, in your account. So the reason I'm forking this now is so that everybody can follow along with me, and because the original repository doesn't live in your account, TFC won't find it when you try to connect to it. So this is the reason for the fork here. And again, if you're following along as a platform engineer, you're doing all of this with me. So we've got our fork here. The next thing we need to do is actually activate HCP Waypoint. So if we open up the HCP portal here, I'll give it a little refresh to make sure it's working. When you log into HashiCorp Cloud Platform, you will see the Waypoint option on the bottom left here. We're going to click on that, and if you've never used HCP Waypoint before, you'll see on the top right there's an Activate Waypoint button. We're going to click that, and magically it'll say there you go. Waypoint's been successfully activated. Create a project to get started using HCP Waypoint. Great, so that's our first step down. The next thing we're going to do is create the required modules for our, create our variables for the modules for our static app module. We're going to go back to Terraform Cloud here, give it another refresh. Hopefully it's all good. Great. So we're going to create a variable set. We're going to do that by going to Settings and then Variable Sets. Create variable set. We'll give this a name that's descriptive, static web app vars. We are going to apply it globally, and the reason we do this is, as I referenced in the beginning, the way HCP Waypoint works is it creates a workspace as the project is being created from a template. So this is to say we can't necessarily let Terraform Cloud know which workspace we're working with because it doesn't exist yet. So we're doing an apply globally to make sure it applies to every workspace in the future. The variables we're going to add, we're going to start with GitHub token. And we're going to give it a value by navigating to GitHub. So github.com/settings/tokens. We're going to generate a new token here, a classic token. Give it a name of TFC Waypoint. Expiration as little as possible. And the two permissions we're going to give it are repo and delete repo. The reason we're doing this is Terraform Cloud is part of our static app module code execution. It's going to create a repository, so it obviously needs permissions to do that. The delete repo permission comes from the fact that when we're cleaning up our workspace, when the developer no longer needs the template, or the project rather, it needs access to delete that on our behalf. So those are the only two we're going to give it, repo and delete repo. We'll generate a token, copy this value, add it in there, mark it sensitive because it's sensitive. Great. So the next few we're going to add have to do with the template organization and the destination organization. So we're going to start with destination org. And again, if we reference the lab notes, all of these are written out there, so you can just copy and paste them. The destination org we're going to do here is telling Terraform Cloud where do we want the new developer repositories to be created, what organization in GitHub. So in this case, we're going to do Games because I've pre-created a organization for that. So inside of here, destination org. It's not as sensitive, so we won't mark it as such. And then the other two we're going to do is template org. And this one, so I should mention, obviously, the destination org, if you're following along, modify that to wherever you want your repositories to be created. In my case, it's Games. And then the template org here is everybody will put this in the same as me. This is the example repository and where it lives. So this lives inside of HashiCorp Education. We'll add that one. Add variable. And then the other one we'll add is template repo. So this is, again, the name of the repository that we want our example code to come from. So in this case, learn HCP Waypoint static app template. I'm sorry it's so long. I tried to be as descriptive as possible. Add that there. Great. And one thing I forgot to mention that our static app module does is as part of the GitHub Actions workflow, it actually publishes a message to our Slack channel. So I've, again, done hand-wavy magic to pre-set up our Slack channel webhook. So I will be adding a variable here for that. If you're following along and you don't have this already set up because the prerequisites didn't have it, that's totally fine. You can create the variable, leave it empty. The action will still run. It will just fail at that point because it's the last one in the step, in the action, pardon me. So I'm going to grab my URL there. Again, market sensitive because I don't want everybody to push messages to our channel. So that is all set up. One thing I just realized is destination org as part of the lab today, I actually want everybody to use Games. And the reason is because you're all developers for Games today. So as part of the lab, assuming everything goes well, the demo gods may not like us today, all of your repositories will be created in there. And we can all follow along and see everybody's repo publication as it's happening. So this is all of the variables we need to publish for our static app module. I'm going to create the variable set there. Everything has been created. Additionally, if you wanted to do it a more programmatic way, you could use the TFE provider to pre-set up your variable set and monitor it that way. I did it this way for the lab, so it made a little bit more sense. But you could use the TFE provider if you prefer. Great, so we have our variables set up. The next thing we're going to do is publish the module to Terraform Cloud. So we'll navigate back to our workspaces. We'll click on Registry. And we will click Publish. One thing I forgot to mention is as we're forking, and this is in the instructions, but because of presentation brain, sometimes it doesn't work out. One more important thing I have to tell you about the forking process is once you fork it, you do have to create a release for it, a tag, so that Terraform Cloud will pick it up when we publish the module. So the way we're doing that from the main GitHub page, we're clicking on Create a New Release, choosing a tag, and we're going to create a new one of v1.0.0. Create a new tag on Publish, give it the same name, publish our release, and then our release is done there. If we go back to our registry page, if we publish the module, you can see here my GitHub app button is already enabled because I've already set it up. If you've never done this before, there's a wizard that takes you to the process. You give it permission, you give TFC permission to use your GitHub account, and then when you click through here, it will query all of the repositories and organizations you have access to. So in this case, I forked it to my own personal space, and we can see it here. So I will click on that, I will click Tag, and then I will make sure to click the Add Module to No Code Provision Allow list. And this is what allows TFC to actually see it and use it as a no-code module when HCP Waypoint runs its create project process. Publish a module, fingers crossed that everything will work. And there we have it. There's our published module. We can see that the version has been picked up, pardon me, and this is the source of our fork. Great, so we have our module published. The next thing we have to do is generate a TFC token for HCP Waypoint, and this is how HCP Waypoint has permission to talk to TFC on our behalf. So we're going to open HashiCorp Cloud Platform again. We're going to click on Settings here. And these are the two values that we need to get from TFC, our Cloud Team token and our Terraform organization name. We can fill this one in right now because on the bottom left, it has HCP Waypoint Lab. We'll copy that over. And as a note for the lab today, if you are following along, you can put the same values in here. I will share the team token in the lab notes in just a second after I generate it. But you can create all of your HCP Waypoint accounts and then point it to our TFC workspace, and then we don't have to deal with the whole make sure you have a plus account. So our organization name is set up. I'm going to generate a token now, and to do that, I will go to Settings, Teams, and I've already created one called Lab Attendees, but we'll create a new one. Lab Attendees. Cooler. That's a great name. Okay, so this is the team organization details page. So the permissions we need to give this token are view all projects, manage all workspaces, and the reason here is because, again, HCP Waypoint requests new workspaces to be created on its behalf, so it needs access to do that. And then the final one we're going to give it is manage run tasks, and this gives it the ability to create and stop executions, or module runs in this case. So we'll make sure we have view all projects, manage all workspaces, manage run tasks clicked, update the team organization access, and then finally we will generate a team token. So click on create a team token, give it an expiration of whatever you want. I'm going to choose a day. And this is our token. So again, in our lab notes here, I will update this to include our team token. Update. Make sure it went through. So again, labnotes.hathatgames.com. Go there and you'll see the TFC team token. Everyone that wants to follow along in HCP Waypoint, you can take this token, copy it, and paste it into your settings page here, and make sure you're using the HCP Waypoint Lab organization name. So I'll give you a chance to copy that down. We'll save that. Our settings have been saved. So right now, our HCP Waypoint configuration points to our TFC workspace and also has a token that gives it permission to view all projects, manage workspaces, and manage run tasks. So it has everything it needs to do to actually create resources on our behalf. I feel like I should be more excited because this is a huge milestone for us. We've done all the configuration we need to do, and now all we need to do is create our template inside of HCP Waypoint, and we're ready to start creating repositories. So before I move on to that, I'm going to jump over to our tutorials again, and I'm going to show you the setup RBAC one. So again, this is available for you to do at your leisure, follow along. RBAC is the way that we restrict access to specific functionality for any of the tools. HCP Waypoint's no different. And because it uses HCP, HCP already has its own set of roles. So those are admin, contributor, and viewer. If you've used HCP before, you probably know this. These roles map to specific permissions inside of HCP Waypoint. And the chart here shows you the permissions that each of those roles have and don't have. The gist of all of this is viewer basically has access to view projects and view add-ons. The contributor maps to the developer role. So I, as the platform engineer, will have the administrator role, and the developer will have the contributor role. And the difference here is developers don't have access to create template definitions or create add-on definitions, whereas a platform engineer does. So the flow there from the first couple slides I mentioned is the platform engineer creates the definitions for templates and add-ons, and the developer logs in, creates a project from a pre-made template definition, and then installs an add-on from a pre-made add-on definition. So that's the gist of RBAC and how it works in HCP Waypoint. With that out of the way, I am currently logged in here as an administrator role. So I have access to create templates, create add-on definitions, and I will do so right now. So we will click on Create Project Template. So these are all the fields that HCP Waypoint needs in order to create a template for us. So we will fill this out by saying static web app. These are tags we're going to give to it that make it a little bit easier to see at a glance what this is doing. So I will say static web app and JavaScript because it uses some of that. And these are short and full summary descriptions. So these are the details that show up for the template configuration when you go to view it inside of HCP Waypoint. So the developer will see this before they click on any of the create project from a template buttons. So we'll use a short description of a template for static web apps, and a more full description would be a static web app template that creates a GitHub repo with a GitHub Actions workflow that deploys to GitHub pages. And the developer instructions is, these are what actually gets shown to the developer when they finish creating their project from a template. So while they're waiting for the resources to be created, this shows up in addition to the summary information. But the cool thing about the developer instructions here is you can use variable interpolation. So here we can use .. .project name, and then when the project is actually created from a template, the developer sees the rendered version of this. So in their case, they would see the Waypoint project name that they provide during the creation point, at the creation point, pardon me. And we will copy this from our Create Waypoint template. So this is the tutorial we're referencing. I'm sorry I'm not going through it step by step, but I'm cherry picking all of the information I need. So down here, this is our developer instructions template, and everything I've been adding is also here for you to copy and paste if you like. So I will copy this here, paste it into that. The one thing I'll mention is update org name here to be Hat Games. And we're using project name here, so when this is actually rendered for the developer, they will actually have a clickable link to their new GitHub repository as it gets created. And then finally, the most important part is our no-code provisioning module. So here we're going to select the module that we previously published, called static app fork in this case. And then we could click on a version if we had other tags here, but it's pre-selecting the latest one. So if you did have older versions, it would create, or it would pre-select the most recent one. But in our case, there's only one. So from here, we can click Create. Hope it works. Looks like it did. Awesome. And from here, on the templates page, we can click on the name of the template, static web app. And here we can see all of the information we added. So we have our short description, long description, developer instructions. And we're not using the Waypoint HCL file here, but that would show up if you did use it. And then finally, that's our module and version there. You can update these if you mess something up or you need to update it later on. One thing I will point out as evidenced in this banner here is any of the changes you make here, most importantly, if you were to update the module version or the module itself, this does not affect any projects that have been created from this in the past. It only works forward. So if I have a bunch of projects, I need to update the module version to use a new version. I cannot retroactively do it from here. It only works for things going forward. So our template is created here. We went through the managing to see all of the other stuff. So at this point, I'm going to say, as a platform engineer, everything is ready. I can reach out to the developer and say, hey, developer, your project template is ready. You can go create projects now. Do a little costume change here. So now I'm the developer at Hat Games, as you can see the logo and the name. So I hear from my platform engineer friend that there's this new thing, HCP Waypoint. It's going to make my job way easier. I don't have to interact with them. And he said I just log into HCP Waypoint and it should just work. So I'm going to do just that. And if you're following along, the developer process starts now, again, because I have the developer hat on. So if you want to follow along, please do. I'm going to log into my account. HCP Waypoint. So as the developer, he was telling me I don't see all the same stuff that he does. But if I click on Waypoint, okay, so there's projects, templates, add-ons. Well, I want a project, so I guess I'll start there. It seems to be the only one. So yeah, that makes sense. I do want a static web app. I'll click on that. And I'll give it the name of Tony's Super Web App. Seems good. There's some details I can see. All right. GitHub repo, actions, workflow, pages. Cool. I just realized I think I'm in the wrong project. Let's go there instead. This is what happens when you do a lot of testing beforehand. You kind of forget which project you're in. So I'm just going to do that again. Go to Waypoint, create a project. Click Next. And there's the updated version. Great. So from here, I'll try it again. Tony's Super Web App. Create a project. Upsert project. OK. So I think I've had this error before. I think this is kind of the growing pain of releasing a new application. This is totally fine. I'm not going to create it in my own developer account. I think there's a little bit of permissioning issue that we have to iron out there. So I'll go back to the platform engineer login part, and I'll just follow the same process. So create a project, click on the template, make sure, yep, that's the right one. Tony's web app, create project, fingers crossed. Looks like it's going. OK, so I haven't talked to the engineer yet, but this seems kind of self-explanatory. It looks like it's setting up some Terraform stuff, unexpected errors, project initializing. So your static web app will be ready soon and contain a workflow and pages. After the project's initialized, you can access your repo with the link below, container README with additional information, and the app. OK. So there's a link here. I guess I can click on it. Generate a repository. All right. So that'll take a couple seconds. It doesn't seem too bad. Anthony here again. As we're waiting for the developer to get their project up and running, I'm going to go over what our static app module is actually doing. So if we check out our lab notes again, we can check out our static app fork here. Our Terraform code is doing a few things here. So one, it's setting up our GitHub provider with the GitHub token that we added as a variable set, so it has access to create and delete repos. It is creating a GitHub repository on our behalf using the Waypoint project. So in this case, Tony's web app, that will show up as the Waypoint project name, making sure it's a visible project, using the template that we have configured as well. So template org, template repo, if you remember, points to HashiCorp education, learn HCP Waypoint, whatever the repo name was. So it copies all the code from that, puts it in our new repo. It enables GitHub Pages on that repository. And then it creates a README file. And in that README file, it creates it from a template. It actually populates the URL in there using the Waypoint project name and destination org that we've configured in our variable set. With a message that just says, hey, the platform team created this for you. And then finally, as I mentioned, the Slack webhook URL, it populates that from Terraform Cloud variable set into a GitHub Actions environment secret. So that's what's happening there. If we go back with our developer hat, we can see it was created, but there's no README file. That's odd. Another refresh. All right. Uh-oh. That's bad. Let's switch to the engineer hat. So this is the great part of live demos. There seems to be an error. So we're going to do some live debugging, if you'll bear with me. If we jump over to Terraform Cloud, Tony's web app has failed. Why has it failed? Not found the repository, README, but it did create that. It created GitHub repo. This is odd. Does anybody have any ideas here? Because this is how live demos work. Joe, I'm looking at you specifically. README file, not working. Well, in the meantime, I'll show you what should have happened as we go through the tutorials because everything is documented there properly. Please forgive me. Again, the demo gods are not shining on me today. This is just part of doing it live. So what should have happened during our create process here is we would create the template for it. And then as we went through to create a project from that template, these are the steps that I just followed, putting in our name, checking out the details. This would be the same progress page that we saw. And we should see a green banner that says, hey, everything was OK. And then the repository was created, but for some reason it didn't give us the README, which is fine. All it had was a link to the GitHub Pages, but it looks like GitHub Pages did actually get deployed, which is great. So we could probably click through there. Nope, that's not it. I never remember how to get to there. View logs. OK. Deploy to GitHub Pages. This should have our URL somewhere. Artifact URL. Notify Slack channel. Oh, that went through. OK. So we can actually get it here. It looked like it did a few times. OK. So this is our latest one, Tony's web app. So if we click through there, hopefully we should see the app. There's the app. OK. So it didn't work exactly as I wanted, but it did still deploy. So this was our demo application code. You can see it's very interactive. But again, didn't work the way I wanted, but it did show the fact that I did create a project from a template in HCP Waypoint, and it did run my Terraform code for me. Why it didn't do everything, I'm not 100% sure. But what we can do now, as a developer, now that I do have my application running, I want to update this code to not use their demo app anymore because I have a really cool idea for an actual demo. So I'm going to clone my repository over here, change to my repo, open VS Code. So not developer, Anthony again here. The way this works is our our example app repository has an app folder here, and anything inside of there will get served as a static web app. So the developer, all they have to do is overwrite anything in here that they want to use their new code, push it up, and then it will run the GitHub Actions again to deploy it to GitHub Pages. So as Anthony just said, I'm going to do just that. I'm going to copy all of my example code here and delete all of this. And paste my code back in. So now all my code is ready to go. If I do a status, I can see all of my code is here. Git add everything. Git comment, initial commit with new code. We'll do a push. And that seemed to work well. So if I go back to my repository here, in just a second, I should see GitHub pages starting up a new deployment, which it has. And here we can watch the logs again. So we can see from here, this is not doing a whole lot of fancy things because this is just a like a static app repository, but because this is a GitHub workflow, you can make it do anything you want, run tests, build other preview environments, reach out to other channels that you want to be notified. So it did update here. If we check our Slack, maybe it didn't fire off just yet, but it did look like it went. So if we refresh, it did refresh. And if we open this URL again, we refresh, hey, there's my game. Looks pretty good. Has anybody played 2048? Probably like 3-4 years ago. Yeah, totally normal. So this is a HashiCorp skinned version. If you really want to play this inside of the Hat Games organization, which is public, there's the code for this. It was written by someone much smarter than me. I just reskinned it for HashiCorp because I think it's kind of fun. So cool. I've deployed my app. It's been updated. I know the GitHub Actions workflow works the way we intended to. So I'll say, hey, I'm ready to share this with the world, but I don't want to give them this github.io URL because it doesn't look that great. So I'm going to say, hey, platform engineer, can you give me a cool subdomain on Hat Games to make it look pretty official? Oh, you bet I can, developer. Hopefully. We'll see how that goes. So we have our template that's creating our app here. So as I mentioned in the beginning, add-ons are for additional infrastructure that we don't necessarily want every application to have. So in this case, our subdomain add-on is not something that every developer would want, but we want it to be available if they want to use it. So in this case, they do. We're going to follow a similar process that we did for the template. And again, this is all in our HCP Waypoint tutorials. The first thing we're going to do is update or create a variable set for our add-on. So we're going to go settings, variable sets, and we're going to create a new one. One thing I'll point out here is I've preloaded my AWS credentials because I don't want to share them with the world. But if you are doing this yourself, you can come here, create a new variable set for your credentials, make sure you apply it globally. And as you're adding variables, create the environment variable over the Terraform one. And you'll just copy and paste your AWS secret ID key. I can never remember exactly what it's called, but that's what you're putting in here. And that will give TFC permission to create a subdomain record for our from our subdomain add-on. So that's already, so my credentials are there, static app is there. We're going to create a new one, and this is going to be subdomain variables. So these will also apply globally. So the three variables that I'm going to define here are, because I've preset up our domain inside of Route 53, I have to give it the hosted zone ID from AWS so that it knows where to create the record or what hosted zone to create the record in. So this variable is called Route 53 zone ID. And the value, I have pre-saved it here. I'll mark it sensitive. So again, if you're following along, this is not, you're not going to use the same zone ID that I did. You will update it with the one that you have created. The other one I'm going to add is AWS region. And depending on how your credentials are set up, sometimes this is pre-set up for you, but to make sure that it's using the right one, I'm explicitly putting it in, US West 1. And then finally, we're going to add domain. And this is hatgames.com. And if you're following along, this one you can use as well because we're all doing it on the same domain. Great, so those are the three variables we need for our subdomain add-on. I'll create a variable set for that. So variables are all set in TFC. The next thing we're going to do is publish the module. So back to our lab notes, click on the subdomain repo, and again, follow the same process that we did for the template. Create the fork. And once the fork is created, we also have to give it a release tag. So we'll click on New Release, give it the same version, v100, same name, publish release. So now we have our tag ready. If we go to our registry in Terraform Cloud, we will publish a new module, connect it to GitHub, and we will use our subdomain repository there. Make sure we add the module to no-code provision, publish the module, and in just a second it will be ready. So from here, as we're waiting, the next thing we're going to do is jump back into HCP Waypoint to create the definition for our add-on, similar to how we did the template. So inside of HCP Waypoint, we'll go back to our projects, and we'll click on add-ons. So as the platform engineer, I can go to the add-ons page here and create an add-on. If I were a developer, I would not see this option. I would just see installing the add-on to my project. So I'll create an add-on, give it subdomain add-on name. This will be subdomain tag, Route 53 tag. Short summary will be an add-on for creating subdomains. And a full summary of this add-on creates a subdomain on the hathatgames.com domain. And the developer instructions also come from our tutorials all the way down here. Copy, paste. And similar to the template, once a developer installs an add-on, this is what they'll see in the end. So here we're just saying, hey, this is your organization, or pardon me, this is your repository in GitHub, and we're just going to give them a link to that using the project name. And we will select our subdomain module, picks the latest version, still at 1.0, and we'll publish. So our subdomain add-on has been created. Similar to the template, again, we can click on the name, see all of the provisioning module, as well as the summaries that we gave it. Great. So we are setting our variables are all done. We've created the add-on definition in Waypoint. We can now finally tell our developers, hey, that subdomain you wanted, the add-on, is ready to go. So the platform engineer says it's ready. I don't know if it's true, but I'm going to go to Waypoint and find my way around to create an add-on here. So this is my project. I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to click on add-ons. Okay, subdomain add-on sounds like what I want. So I'm going to click install there and see what happens. Okay, so it's installing, installed add-ons. It's still going, great. So Anthony here, I'm going to show you what this module code is doing while we're waiting for that to install. So if we go back to our lab notes, we can click on our subdomain repo. And here we can see the Terraform code. The first thing it's doing is setting up our provider. So in this case, we're using both GitHub and AWS. GitHub because we are updating a file in the repo, and AWS because we are updating Route 53 configurations. So we're setting up both of those providers with the organization and token that I mentioned before. We are creating a subdomain URL file. So the reason we're not appending this in this scenario to the README file is because if we were to append it there and then uninstall the add-on, it would delete whatever file we've modified. So in this case, the README file would be deleted, which is not something we want. So we're creating a new file called shortlink.md. And in there, we're creating just a text that says the URL. So in this case, http:/the Waypoint project name, in our case, Tony's web app, .our domain, hathatgames.com. And this is the meat of what it's doing. If you've ever tried to do redirections inside of AWS, you know about the S3 bucket redirection. All of this to say we're creating a bucket with a name that matches our subdomain. And then we're creating a configuration, an A record inside of Route 53 that points to that bucket, which then redirects to our GitHub.io GitHub Pages page. So that's what's happening here. It looked like it installed, really good. So if we were to go back to being our developer, so it said it installed. Where do I find out? OK, so a subdomain is being created. Once it's complete, check your app repo for a short link file. And there's a link there. If I open this link, oh, there is a short link. OK. This looks pretty professional. I wonder if this is going to work. Doing something. Hey, look at that. So it seems like that does work. So if anybody wants to verify this, you can follow tonyswebapp.hathatgames.com, and it will take you to this lovely page here. You can play along as I'm talking some more. But this looks really good. So I'm going to thank the platform engineer. Thank you so much for doing this. It was exactly what I wanted, and now I have a professional URL to send to a bunch of people. No problem at all, developer. That's what we're here for. Yeah, so the developer's happy. I'm happy. They're creating things the way we want. They're not creating infrastructure that we then have to clean up afterwards. So I'm happy as a platform engineer. And I'm happy as Anthony from HashiCorp because everything worked out much better than I expected. Isn't it just heartwarming when technology works the way you want, even though the demo gods don't? One thing I'll mention at the end of this as a part of our conclusion is we want to clean up all of these things that we've created. So HCP Waypoint actually allows us to do that from HCP Waypoint instead of going to TFC. So if I were to say the developer, I want to uninstall my add-on, I want to destroy the resources, I'm going to show you our workspaces here. So these are all the workspaces that have been created as part of either our template project creation or our add-on creation. So if I were to come to the add-ons in the developer's project here, you can see that this one has been installed, but we can uninstall it. So if I were to uninstall it from here, we should see in a second. So it's gone from HCP Waypoint, and if we monitor these, one of them should start applying the destruction process, and there it goes. So all this to say, we don't have to go to TFC to clean up stuff. We can clean it up from HCP Waypoint directly, and either as a developer or the platform engineer, this just saves us another step of having to go to TFC. Similarly, we can do this for the project. So on the settings page after the project's been selected, we can click on settings, manage, and then destroy project. And this does the same flow as the add-on. It will delete the project from HCP Waypoint and then delete any related infrastructure inside of TFC. So that's the majority of our lab. I'm going to go back to this here and just do a little wrap up. So HCP Waypoint, as we learned today, helps us develop faster. As platform engineers, we can abstract away infrastructure from the developers. We do that through two functions, templates, which allow us to define required infrastructure, and add-ons, which allow us to define additional infrastructure that's not necessarily required for every application. And so that's it. If you wanted to follow along the lab notes, again, labnotes.hathatgames.com, or you can go directly to developer.hashicorp.com, click through to Waypoint, and you'll find all the tutorials I've been referencing today. And then the last plug I'm going to do is, if you want to talk to me about this, I'm going to be at the education booth just outside the doors here. If you want to talk to Joe from the HCP or from the Waypoint engineering team, he's down in the hub or the zone, I forget what it's called. So 2 levels down where all of the food was and all the vendors are, there's a booth for Waypoint, Nomad, Vagrant. Joe will be there, possibly with other people. They know a lot more about Waypoint than I do. So the really tough questions, I'll probably point you there. My name's Anthony from the education team. Thanks so much for bearing with me in this presentation. Hope you enjoyed it.